This is the Becoming Muslim podcast at untoislam.com, the show that helps people convert to Islam with hosts from the US, UK, and Australia.
And I just started praying, and I was like, I'm not going to be quote unquote arrogant enough to know who or what or whatever I'm praying to. But I just started praying and praying and praying, and things slowly started getting better. It was like, I've looked into pretty much everything. Why haven't I actually started looking into Islam? One of the lowest points in my life, but it ultimately led to Islam. And it was like, as soon as I started looking, not even when I reverted, but when I started looking seriously into Islam, my life just started getting better. I think a lot of reverts, we put too much pressure on ourselves. They always say, Allah make it easy for you. So we sit there and make it as complicated as humanly possible. Life isn't perfect. It's not perfect. There's still struggles. But Islam itself gave me, I think in the first time in my life, the comfort, enough reassurance and comfort that I was feeling safe enough to feel vulnerable. I have my opinions, but you do you. But for myself, it was not empowering. I did not like it. And I guess I was just like, then I guess I'm not very feminine. Islam has also allowed me to really explore my feminism, wearing hijab, dressing more modestly and everything. And I still worry about clothes sometimes, but it's also allowed me to explore my femininity in a way that I'm actually enjoying. One, it's not as scary as you think it is. It's not as complicated as you think it is. And the rewards are literally beyond this world. And small little things like that. Islam gives me hope. So
that's beautiful. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our program. I'm welcoming Sister Val. She converted to Islam in October of 2020, which is, not that long ago, almost a year ago. So I converted actually in December of 2019. So right before the pandemic, subhanAllah. Born and currently lives in Central Illinois. You're 33 years old, and you are certified to teach English to foreign language learners. And you are a writer, an artist, and activist, and you're passionate about education, Islam, the arts, and creating community, those are all wonderful things.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. And tell me your name, since you converted to Islam. You came up with a new name.
Yeah, I did take the name Khawlah, Khawla. She was one of the first Muslims. She was actually a military genius and a medic, and is quite possibly one of the coolest historical figures I've ever read about. So I was very, very happy to talk to a few people, and they're like, you realize people are going to have issue pronouncing that. And I'm like, if they can pronounce European names, they can learn how to pronounce that. So
yeah, of course. I mean, come on, we all have, somebody's going to have trouble pronouncing somebody's name somewhere. So we live in a big world. There's a lot of different names, and I like that name. That's pretty cool.
So
wow, alhamdulillah. So my first question for you is, was it hard to convert?
Yes and no. Converting to Islam itself was a multi-year process. I looked into it quite a bit. And converting itself wasn't a problem. Afterwards was, and specifically a lot of my friends' reactions, my family's reactions to it, kind of. So emotionally, that's been difficult. But converting to Islam, once I started getting some of the big questions that I had, like some of the major ones answered, it was just sort of like, okay, I'm yeah.
Wow.
What do we actually do for this? So
That's amazing. So you're saying the hard parts was kind of afterwards.
yeah.
Are there any easy parts?
The easy parts were once I kind of had downtime to do so. Like I'm like I didn't want to really revert without at least rising with myself with the Quran and small things like that. And there are a lot of resources if you dig for them online. So actually learning about the religion was the easy part. Finding other Muslims in the middle of a global pandemic was not.
Yeah,
So
I
it
can
was
see
very,
that could be
very
a problem.
lonely. Like I spent Ramadan kind of like, mashallah for the internet, because it was a lot of online Muslims that kept me sane and stuff like that.
Yes.
So,
I did a lot of online classes. I still am actually over Zoom during my first Ramadan because it was a virtual one.
Yeah. So
like yours.
Yeah, it was I'm sitting there like it is exactly 5 minutes past suhoor. Like, can I still do suhoor? Like I'm failing Ramadan. I'm like, and they're like, no, this is your first Ramadan. The fact that you're doing it at all is, praiseworthy. And yes, do suhoor. Like just drink some water and eat some yogurt. You'll be okay.
Just do something real quick.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll work out. I know that's hard. I know one time I woke up at 11 o'clock during Ramadan, and anyway, there was no wiggle room there. I was like, oh no, I missed it entirely. So I was just really hungry that day. SubhanAllah. So yeah, well, that's interesting. So you were mentioning that afterward was more of a problem for you. So what was that like? You were talking about your friends and your family and how they responded.
My brother is actually fairly, like, he's been wonderful about it. It's just sort of like, oh, Val's doing this thing now. Okay, cool.
Okay, well, that's nice.
Some other family, I have a lot of family down south in Mississippi, Alabama, so on and so forth. I spent a lot of my childhood on the Gulf Coast.
Oh, it's so pretty there.
Yeah. And they just got rude. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into it. And then some friends, they were, oh, you're Muslim now. Okay, well, you're not like too Muslim, are you? And I'm like, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
Like,
what do you mean too Muslim?
Like, okay. And then I started wearing hijab, and it was when I actually started wearing hijab that like some friendships that I've had since I was like younger started falling by the wayside. And at first it was really, really kind of painful. But then I was reflecting back on those friendships, and I was like, how much of it was, trauma bonding? How much of it was we all had rough childhoods? How much was it an actual friendship, or was it just sort of one of those things? So it's, I get told all the time, it was like, when you revert, you're going to lose friends. It's most people have. And I did not expect that. But I have since then met some local women that have been absolutely amazing. They kind of like keep me in check a little bit when but what about this? I want to argue all the time. And
sure. I had those moments too. Like, well, what about XYZ?
Yeah.
Why not?
Like, why is this a thing? Like, I was sitting there like trying to find wiggle room about tattoos. I actually have several tattoos, and I'm but what if I got a tattoo of the Quran? Like, what if I like, no, that's extra spicy haram. Don't do that. That's
Oh
like,
no.
like,
Oh, no.
and I'm like, okay, those are completely out. I've accepted that. But that was more so when I first reverted.
Sure. I don't know. I mean, if you have a tattoo already before converting,
Yeah,
I mean, there's not much you could do about it. Are you supposed to
no.
get it removed now? I don't know. I really don't know.
Some Muslims do. I'm
Hmm.
not choosing to because the whole idea is tattoos are haram because they hurt you, like
Hmm.
physically. They physically hurt
Sure.
you.
Oh,
And I'm
okay.
like, but wouldn't removal also hurt
That
me?
would
It's
hurt
like,
you. Yes.
so
I guess,
I'm
yeah, that's a good point.
so I'm like, okay. I have a lot of like these like sleeves covering and whatnot.
Sure.
So you can't most people wouldn't even know if I didn't
Sure.
say something. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so a lot of it was kind of like trying to find wiggle rooms around some of the rules and everything. And then I'm just sort of like, but is it really that important? Like, is it really that big of a deal? And I'm like, no, stop trying to find little
Well,
gray
sometimes
areas.
there's a difference of opinion. There really
Mhm.
are. People have different opinions about things.
Like
And so,
music.
yeah, like
Music is a big
music is a
one.
big one. Yeah, it really is. There's a lot
And
of,
I'm like, music is a coping mechanism. Let's work on one sin at a time.
yes, let's
Like,
work on one thing. And as a musician myself, it's hard for
mhm.
me to say that I 100% agree with what I've learned so far because there's so many different opinions.
I can't
So
find anywhere that actually says specifically that music as a whole is haram. But
I can't either. It's not in the Quran, and I think it has more to do with the Hadith, but I know very little
mhm.
about that, so I'm not even gonna go there. That's too deep. It's too
Yeah,
deep for me.
yeah.
So I want to just start from the beginning, and um, it's not like I listen to music like
Mhm.
nonstop. I think it's more the idea of anything, including music, taking you
Mhm.
away from the worship of Allah subhanahu wa
Yeah,
ta'ala. That's
the
the
content,
problem.
the content. If the
Sure.
content's about like, it's also made me examine like what music I did listen to, and
Sure.
drugs or alcohol or going out and
Yeah,
promiscuity and so on and so
promiscuity,
forth.
things like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't want to like listen to that sort of thing. That's nothing you want to encourage yourself to do, right? You
no.
don't want to
So
listen to the haram. That would be haram.
yeah,
Uh, I think I had someone say to me, a sheikh say to us as a class, and you know what you're not supposed to listen to.
yeah,
I don't have to go over that.
yeah. And I'm like, if I applied this song to my life, would it be haram or halal? And I'm like, oh, this life would be haram. I should probably find new music. So
Yes. I mean, there are certain songs that just, and then some are creepy. Some of those love songs they have out there.
mhm. I'm
If
like,
you
this
really
is because
think about them, they're creepy.
I'm like, I would end up dead in someone's basement. Like, I'm not like, this is not love.
it's not love. It's like, every breath you take, the
No,
police
that's a
song.
stalker song. Get a
Yeah, it
restraining
is
order.
straight up
Get a
stalker.
restraining order.
This guy is like crazy.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a few like that, and I listen to him now and I go, "Oh, wait a second, that's toxic. That's not even like a
Mhm.
healthy like kind of love at all." So
Mhm.
yeah.
And I also started looking at the music that I would listen to like when I'm down or depressed. And I'm like, is
Hmm.
this just about being down and depressed, or is it about hope and,
Sure.
renewal and like the light at the end of the tunnel and everything?
Sure.
And I'm like, no, if it's just my life is miserable and I hate life, like this isn't going to
No,
help
yeah,
me.
that's not going
So
to help you. Yeah.
so
No, you're right. You're right. I think that's important. I used to sing a lot of hymns in church, and so I
mhm.
mostly stick to hymns. Although
Yeah.
sometimes there's some of those are a little questionable.
Yeah. I still listen to some Southern gospel. I'm
I do
like,
like gospel music. Yeah.
mhm. I'm like it's not incompatible with Islam and we're
No.
mhm.
Although I'm not a big fan of the song "Mary, Did You Know?" because I feel like
No.
they're mansplaining to her. It's like you know, she knows.
Yeah, like
You don't have to ask her if she knows because she knows. She knows before any of you all knew. Why are you explaining this to her?
I'm
So
talking like a lot of like I went down to the river to
yes, I love
pray,
that
like
song.
those songs and
The good old days. Yeah,
away and who should
that's a
sorry
beautiful
found
song.
good. Yeah.
But
So
yeah, no. Anyway, so yeah,
yes.
music is one of those things which we're still exploring.
Mhm.
And I mean, I find right now I'm just so busy, learning to read Quran that I actually
Mhm.
don't listen to music so much because I'm
Yeah.
too busy doing other things. So,
Yeah. It's been a lot of like, okay, well, I really want to listen to music. Let's get on Spotify and put on the Quran.
mhm, they
Because
have it.
to a native English speaker, the Quran does sound like music.
It does.
Like
It really
it
does.
does, and
It
it's
really does.
beautiful, and it's one of the
Alhamdulillah.
reasons why I was drawn to the Quran. It's one of the reasons why I'm focusing on learning Arabic. Arabic's a beautiful anyway, so
It's beautiful, and I love
um,
listening to the Quran and reading the Quran and reciting the Quran.
mhm,
It's an amazing thing, and it's very doable.
mhm.
So I think people, not people, but some really feel like it's just a really hard thing to learn. But alhamdulillah, it took me with a lot of intense study. It took me about maybe 3, 4 weeks to learn how to read.
Yeah.
I read like a kindergartner. I didn't know what tajweed was, and I didn't know all those little rules, but I could at least read something.
Yeah, I didn't know about like when I first started reading, I would just the first Quran I got is in English, so I feel a little bit less guilty, but it is beat up. It's dog-eared.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like it's had food dropped on it and
Mhm.
everything, but
SubhanAllah.
I got other Qurans that are better taken care of, and that one specifically, I'll probably never get rid of. Never get rid of.
Well, no,
It
because
was
it has a meaning to you.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was a gift for one by
Mhm.
one of the people that I took Shahada with,
Sure.
and it just I didn't know the rules about it. I didn't know go make wudu before you read it and so on and so forth.
Yes,
It
I
was
didn't. I
just
didn't know that either.
yeah.
I just didn't know. But my teacher, he's basically said to me, because I asked him directly about
Mhm.
etiquette for the Quran, and it's actually in another podcast that I did. I actually interviewed him for our podcast, and he just basically said, not to learn your etiquette from a book.
Yeah. So
So, and I think at one point during class, he said to me, just as long as your hands are clean, that's the most important thing.
mhm.
Like, don't let not being a complete wudu stop you from reading the Quran, but that's the ideal, is to be in wudu.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah. So, anyway, let's keep going. So, why did you become Muslim? You kind of hinted at this earlier? Was there some kind of crisis in your life?
yes and no. Yes, there was some crises in my life. The reason why I reverted, it's been, like I said, a multi-year process. I'm not trying to focus on this, but I was in middle school when 9/11 happened,
Mhm.
and I progressively saw the world go insane.
Mhm.
At least in America, I was just
Mhm.
like
Yes.
disgusted by what was going on. And to be blunt, most of the people that I knew that were suddenly hating on Muslims and
Mhm.
Islam
Mhm.
were a bunch of people that I argued about things like race
Sure, sure.
and income inequality and
Mhm.
systemic oppression and everything. So I'm like, if
Sure.
they're saying this Islam thing is super scary, let me look into it to kind of combat that. I became
Mhm.
very, very just like the five pillars, kind of
Mhm.
clarifying. And I'm like, this is not that scary. I don't
Sure,
know.
sure,
They're just
sure.
making a big ado about nothing. And then I put it on the back burner
Sure,
and
sure.
didn't look into it for a handful of years later. So it became more involved in a lot of activist scenes
Mhm.
and encountered a lot more Muslims.
Sure.
So I'm like, okay, let me familiarize myself with more. I'm interacting with more Muslims. I don't want to unintentionally offend anyone.
Of course not. Yeah.
Yeah, so I started looking more, and I still like I don't know how to interact more. Like I just don't. I'm working on my Dean. That
Mhm.
part I
Mhm.
haven't figured out.
Sure, sure.
But uh, became more familiar and everything, and I started liking a little bit more of
Mhm.
what I was reading about.
Mhm.
At the time, though, my great grandfather, first of all, was a Southern Baptist minister.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he was a Southern Baptist minister. I was never and have never been a Christian. So I was always kind of the black sheep in my family. My mother herself was and still is a staunch atheist. But she's a very good person, and I pray that she finds Hidayah. But I was raised without religion, and I've always been a spiritual person. So I've looked at pretty much every religion. Christianity, Judaism, paganism, some of the more like occult, esoteric stuff. And most of the time, it did not feel like home. I felt something was spiritually lacking. My father, he passed away 10 years ago. He was a drug addict and alcoholic.
Oh, subhanAllah.
He drank himself to death. And once I hit high school, I pretty much had no guidance from any of the adults in my life. I got into drugs and alcohol. I was very, very lost, very, very depressed. I did join the Navy briefly until the Iraq War popped off. I had not gone to basic yet. I'm like, no, you're not sending me to the Sunni Triangle over oil and poppy fields. That's not going to happen. So dropped out of that. I had no clue what I'm doing. Kind of got my stuff together. I had my son and my daughter. I ended up getting married. It was I didn't realize it at the time, but it was an emotionally and mentally abusive relationship. At the time, I'd kind of just given up on finding a religion. I was just like, I worship creation. I worship going outside and seeing the beauty of nature. I go outside and like ecosystems and, you know, how perfect these systems are and the beauty in it, so on and so forth. Then when I started the divorce process, a lot of things all compounded at one time. And I'm also a huge literature fan. I love Rumi.
Oh, I do too. He's a wonderful poet.
He's one of my like comfort reads, and I don't. Rumi really likes Allah. Like he really loves Islam. And I'm in the middle of a divorce. My grandfather, who was a stable male in my life, he and my grandmother helped raise me when my mom was getting sober. He died. My half brother died. Let me see. I was going through a divorce. I was having health crisis after health crisis after health crisis. And my mental health just tanked. And I've never been that low in my entire life. And that was all in the latter half of 2019.
Okay. Yes, that makes sense. Yes. That's a lot to go under. That's a lot of stress. I mean, we can only, as human beings, handle so much, and that's just overwhelming. Even hearing you talk about it. So when it was towards the end of 2019, I went to my doctor, and I'm like, look, I'm really depressed. I need help. They're like, okay. We can try some stuff. And they put me on a medication that we didn't realize at the time, but it started making me hallucinate. Oh no.
Because of the serotonin. I basically had serotonin syndrome. Nobody realized what was going on. So I'm on this medication for 2 months and going completely crazy. Because
you were hallucinating, and that would be would be difficult. I have narcolepsy, so I get those sort of things. I understand a little bit, but at least I know what's going on. You did not know.
No, I did not know. Anything that affects serotonin is pretty much listed as an allergy. That includes, they switched my migraine medication because it affects serotonin. I've been told to avoid certain it's literally anything that increases serotonin. But the issue was I had all of these things going on 2019, and I went on this medication. The main problem with that medication is I was in soul care at times of my children.
Sure.
While I was hallucinating.
Oh my goodness.
And I did not give them the proper care, not because I'm a bad mom.
Yeah, sure.
But because it was just out of my control. My ex used that against me, sort of, and he put an order of protection on me.
Wow.
Then COVID hit.
Yeah, that's not going to help. Then COVID happened.
Then COVID happened. So went off the medication. There was recovery time from my brain being pretty much melted. And I'm like, I don't know what I need to do, but for the first time, so I didn't have my children, recovering from a lot of trauma the prior year before, going through a divorce, all of these things. And I just started praying. And I was like, I'm not going to be quote unquote arrogant enough to know who or what or whatever I'm praying to. But I just started praying and praying and praying, and things slowly started getting better.
Wow.
Then I was like, I've looked into pretty much everything. Why haven't I actually started looking into Islam? So I actually started looking into Islam.
Sure.
Like seriously.
Seriously looking into it.
Seriously looking
And I think that's a good point to make to our dear readers, is a lot of times they're not even sure if they should start looking into Islam. Maybe this is their first step in looking into Islam. So yeah, find, it's okay to look in and to explore and to learn about Islam. Dear listeners, we can do that. We did, right? We both did that.
Yeah. We do our research. We
start somewhere.
Yeah. So,
and the Quran encourages you to do your research and not to just accept any religion blindly.
Yeah.
So, alhamdulillah.
And what actually sold me on it, like after everything else, was the concept of nafs and wahida.
Okay. Explain that a little bit. Nafs and wahida. So I know kind of what nafs are, but I don't know the second word very well. But explain them both for the listener.
Nafs and wahida is the concept where basically we're all created from the same soul. And then we're all from the same soul, and then we're released in pairs. That pair is supposed to be your soulmate. That part I don't really care about. But it's just, we're all made from the same soul. It's literally nafs and wahida, one soul. And wahid is one in Arabic.
Wahid is one. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. And so if you're sitting there hurting yourself, if you're sitting there smoking or drinking or
sure.
engaging in that, not only are you hurting yourself, but you're hurting everyone. Kind of like collective consciousness, which I had already vibed with.
Yeah.
And
I've heard a few things about collective consciousness. So.
Yeah. And I will say that for new Muslims, there is an organization out of New York called Nafs and Wahida, and they do free welcome boxes to new Muslims.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it includes a prayer, a Quran, a handful of other things, like small books on, one's called like The Fortress of a Muslim, one's on prayer.
Yes, that's a very good one. I've heard it comes highly recommended, The Fortress of a Muslim.
So I get excited about that. And it's completely free if you can't afford it. So
that's awesome. I'm going to have to look into that myself.
But so I was staying with a friend of mine, just kind of was like, I can't be by myself right now. My head's too all over the place.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
And I was talking to them, and I'm just like, I think I'm Muslim. Like, I think I might be Muslim. I'm not sure. I think I have a lot of questions still, but I think I might be Muslim. And their response was, that makes sense.
Sure. Oh,
that's not the response that I was expecting.
Really, that makes sense. That's
and I'm like, alhamdulillah. Like, alhamdulillah. Like, I couldn't pronounce, I couldn't even read the word alhamdulillah back then, but now I know it. And it was like their response was, this makes sense.
Sure.
So my life's a complete disaster. We all might die in this pandemic.
Sure.
I was like, you know what? I want to go back to school. I really want to go back to school. And there was a school in rural Iowa, of all places,
Yeah.
that taught Ayurvedic medicine.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Yeah, and I was very, very interested in it. So I went there, and they, in my opinion, should not have been open during the pandemic. Nobody really learned anything.
Oh, okay.
But there was a huge, like, international is literally in the title of the
Sure.
school.
International Ayurvedic something, probably.
It
I'm
was
guessing.
Maharishi International University.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And there were students from literally all over the world. So I'm questioning, like, I hadn't taken Shahada. I didn't consider myself a Muslim. I didn't consider myself following Islam at that point. I was teetering. Like,
you're teetering. You were just thinking about it. You're wanting to learn more, which is okay. It's okay.
And there was no mosque, because we're in the middle of rural Iowa. No mosque, no sisters, nothing. A huge Hindu population, an absolutely huge Hindu population. But there were a group of Egyptians. One of them really needed help with English. The rest of them were like, oh, here's this cute American who wants to learn Arabic. Yes.
Oh,
and then they started out with, well, what Arabic do you know? And I'm like, Iowa, la, inshallah, mashallah. And they're like, are you Muslim? And I'm like, no. And they're like, are you sure? And I'm like, no. So they were a bunch of men, but they were all so hyper respectful. Like,
that's wonderful.
So incredibly, they didn't try any funny business. Sure. Respectful.
That's wonderful.
And they finally answered the 500 questions that I had. And
that's wonderful.
Finally, I'm like, okay, what do I have to do? What do we have to do? We're sitting there driving. We're in a vehicle. And I'm like, what do I have to do? And they're like, you just need to take Shahada. I'm like, okay, let's do it. So I took Shahada, not at a mosque, but in a moving vehicle. And then I found out, it was like, you guys have been in America for 2 years and you have not had a waffle? This is unacceptable.
They have not had a waffle?
They hadn't had a waffle.
No waffles?
I'm like, no.
What?
No, this is not, no, this is unacceptable. So I took Shahada in a moving vehicle. And then we all went to go get Belgian waffles.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love waffles.
Right? And they're like, these are amazing. And I'm like, I know, you need waffles in your life.
Yes. So you converted them to the waffles.
Yes, they converted me to Islam, and then I converted them to waffles. And then it was sort of just learning more and more on my own. And life isn't perfect. It's not perfect. There's still struggles. But Islam itself gave me, I think in the first time in my life, the comfort, enough like reassurance and comfort that I was feeling safe enough to feel vulnerable.
Sure.
And instead of running around being codependent and trying to help everyone else in my life,
yes,
it was like, no, I'm not okay right now. Surah Al-Ada, ADHA. I've read that like 9,000 times. So it was like, he found you lost and guided you. That one.
Oh yes, I love that one. Yes.
I've read it a million times. Whenever I'm struggling, I will go back and read it. It's probably going to be the first thing I memorize in Arabic. I'm not worried about that right now. It's only been a year. But it was just literally like learning to trust Allah. Saying like, when I try and control things, I turn into a human disaster.
Yes.
And like Jesus, take the wheel. Like Allah, like, it was like, so it was literally learning to trust God. And like eventually I did not start wearing hijab until Ramadan. That was pretty much my goal.
That's a good goal.
Yeah,
you don't have to just jump in the deep end. You know, when you first become Muslim, that's the beauty of it. You don't have to.
No.
You can wade in slowly.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. Like, what was it that made you finally decide to wear the hijab? Like, how was that process?
It was, I had thought about it, but I was nervous because then you become visibly Muslim. And I don't think people who were raised Muslim quite understand like the transition. It's very, very difficult to explain. But when I started wearing, I'm kind of a tomboy. Like I like camping. Martial arts. Like, you know, I'm not a girly girl. But when I started wearing hijab, for one, I felt pretty. Like using the adjective pretty.
Pretty, yeah.
For the first time in my life. And I'm like, oh, like I love this. And then I'm just sitting there like, you know, aesthetics aside, because when I first started wearing it, I used to joke that I looked like a drunk nun.
Oh no!
It was not cute. It was not. It was
a drunk nun.
Yeah, it was.
Why? Because of all the beautiful colors. I see it was falling off. I was like, why?
It was falling off. It was like it was not. Yeah, it was just.
I still have that problem. I still do.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I've walked out of work where I was wearing my hijab, and I get to my car, my scarf is at my shoulders.
Yeah.
And the whole time I walked all the way past everyone. And you know, I have a vice principal and a principal, and they're both Muslim. And I walked past their offices and like no one said anything.
Like you can't warn me. Like you can't be like
you didn't tell me that my scarf is off. You can see my
sister,
hair.
Your hijab is sideways. Like go run to the bathroom real quick. Like, but when I first started wearing it, like it was like, you know, I wanna work on my deen. I wanna honor Allah.
Sure.
And I hated it at first. I hated it. I'm like, this is hot. How can you sin when all you do is fight with a piece of fabric all day? Like, first of all,
I know. It's like a fitna in and of itself. It's a trial.
Like I would stab myself, and like it was not a good. And I quit a handful of times, and when I did, everything would go wrong. Like I'd lose my wallet, I lost my ID, my car would stop working. I'm like, okay, and then I'd finally feel safe enough to wear it again. And I do have especially with my upbringing and everything, especially with my dad and addiction, I have issues with, I have PTSD from a lot of it, like complex. Sure, of course.
Yeah,
so I have a lot of issues, like I need to feel safe.
Yeah, of course.
Like when I wore a hijab, I felt safe. And things would start going right. Like my car would be fixed. I'd find my wallet. Like not only did I find, like my car got fixed, but like I found a $10 bill on the ground.
Wow.
Like and I'm like, okay, Allah, I get your point. Like I get your point. And it's just when I wear hijab, like I feel closer to Allah, and it was bumpy up and down, but
and I think it's important to point out to our listeners, you know, dear listeners, that it's a process. It's not like you just do everything all at once. And I think if you tried to, you would burn out, right?
Yeah,
you would. So it's okay to take things in a stepwise fashion.
And sometimes if you're just like in your sweatpants and stuff at home and all you need to do is run to the gas station, putting up a hoodie or something. I'll throw on an undercap and just use a hoodie and then go run to the gas station and come back. It doesn't have to be a whole thing as long as you're covered. And I think a lot of reverts, like we put too much pressure on ourselves. They always say, Allah make it easy for you. So we sit there and make it as complicated as humanly possible. And then like, oh, I'm a terrible Muslim. And I'm, you know.
We make it hard on ourselves, you know. Instead of realizing it actually doesn't have to be hard, that Islam is easy. Right. So did you notice any differences before and after the hijab and how people reacted to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Men were more respectful for me,
Mm-hmm.
or to me, not for me. They were more respectful as a whole. Older white people like suddenly like hated me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Oglala Lakota on my dad's side.
Oh, alhamdulillah, yeah.
Yeah. And so like if I'm wearing a mask,
Mm-hmm.
like all you see are like dark eyebrows and
Mm-hmm,
everything. And then
mm-hmm.
I'm wearing a hijab. I've had random people come up and start speaking Arabic to me. And I'm like, Shwaya, like I was born and raised in America. I'm not Arab, but you
Sure,
know,
sure.
marhaba to you as well.
Marhaban. That's all.
Like, assalamu alaikum, random person. Thank you.
Sure, sure. That's interesting.
Yeah, and
People
it
think
was
I'm Arab as well. Like
yeah,
even yesterday, someone said, I thought you were Arab.
no.
I was like, no, no. Mhm.
And it's either very, very positive, like overly positive,
Mhm.
or very negative. It was
Sure,
kind of
sure,
a wake up call for like how bad Islamophobia still is in America.
sure, sure.
Then with all of the stuff that's gone on with Afghanistan and everything, it's
Mhm.
kind of like compounded even
Sure,
more.
sure.
Like I said, I had friends that have kind of dropped me.
Mhm.
But other people who I wouldn't expect who are
Mhm.
now actually like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, if Val actually converted to Islam and I trust Val, maybe I should kind of look in it too.
Oh,
So
alhamdulillah. So kind of
yeah,
a dawah, in a way. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
So it's like
amazing.
a ripple effect, so to speak. And none of them have actually reverted, but they're at least open to dialogue and
Sure, sure.
everything.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
And which I wouldn't, you know,
Mhm.
they weren't
Mhm.
really interested in having.
It probably wasn't on the radar until you became
Mm-mm.
Muslim because they just
Yeah,
probably weren't thinking about it. I mean, to
no.
be honest,
Or
maybe. Yeah,
like
that's
here's
amazing.
this, someone that we consider like very strong and outspoken and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. It was like suddenly wearing hijab and praying. Like
Mm-hmm.
I rarely pray Fajr, but then I found out that like if you miss a prayer, you can just like make it up. So I just a lot of times I'll do Fajr when I first wake up. I'll like go run to the bathroom and then like it's the first thing I do.
I have done that before where I've woken up late and I just pray Fajr and then like immediately after I remember to wake up. But
Yeah.
inshallah, we'll have few missed prayers. I
Yeah.
feel like at the beginning I had that more of a problem with that because I was also working in a hospital. And so someone told me I could combine prayers.
I didn't know that.
And then, but there's stipulations to it, which I didn't know about. And I did it for a while. Like I would just combine my prayers. And then I found out later I wasn't supposed to do that, like from a sheikh. So, dear listeners, you have to be cognizant of who you're getting the information from because some people may give you incorrect information. Like she meant well, and I thought she was very knowledgeable. She led the women's halakha, but at the same time, I was misinformed.
Yeah.
So
I've also said that if you ask two Muslims the same question, you'll get three different answers.
so true.
so, so I focus on the Quran and Hadith a lot of times. I started looking in, I really, really recommend reverts also look into tafsir.
A tafsir.
Because,
Okay. So explain what tafsir is. So
in terms of Christianity, it's called an exegesis. It's basically, some of these surahs and everything in the Quran, there is a lot of cultural context behind them. And if you look into that cultural context, it makes the Quran make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, sure. You got to have the context.
So it's basically, you can read the Quran, from front to cover and not get absolutely either everything or nothing, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, sure.
But with tafsir and everything, it just kind of clarifies a lot of things. So, don't stress yourself out and think that you have to look into it immediately.
Sure.
But I do recommend that because it has helped with my Dean. It has helped with me understand kind of the history. Why did Islam even did Islam even like come into being?
Yeah, why was it? Yeah, why? Like, what happened at the beginning?
Yeah.
You know.
And I like that. So it's been a constant learning process, and it will continue to be a constant learning process. And
I think so, yeah. That's the beauty of Islam. I like learning, and I like the idea that this is a constant learning process, that there's not really necessarily an end to it. And I mean, for me, like I have found, you know, like a couple of different sheikhs and a sheikha even, I followed them and I kind of listened to them a little bit more. Like if I know, especially if I talk to the person like one-on-one, I feel more confident in what they're saying. But if I question it, then I know I can. Like I don't have to take anyone like this is their opinion, and I can always do more research if something that they tell me makes me feel uncomfortable. If that makes sense. But I don't think anyone should be afraid of doing that, because you know we have the same thing other religions have, which is people in the religion. They're all people, and people are imperfect, and people make mistakes. People take advantage. You know, it's not something endemic, you know, specific to one religion. It's specific to people. Yeah. And since we have people in this religion, that's going to happen.
The saying I hear over and over again is Islam is perfect, Muslims are not.
Exactly. So
that's what
human beings are not perfect. And I feel like it's a blessing in a way, because being imperfect gives us the ability to learn. If we were perfect, like the angels, we wouldn't be able to learn. And I don't know about you, but I love to learn. So I embrace my imperfection. It's my superpower.
Yeah, when I get bored, I get in trouble. So Islam has
me too.
I get in trouble when I'm bored. And I don't know, with Islam, it's been, even if my material, like I stay with my mother, a combination of the pandemic and then, you know, the divorce, and she needs help because of her health and everything.
Yeah, of course. SubhanAllah.
So, and at first, like, I was kind of like down on myself. I'm like, I'm 33 years old. I'm living with my mom. Like, what is that? And then like people in like specifically Islamic countries, they're like, yeah, you're not married. I mean, you are married, but you're single. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Single women or men, they just don't move out of their parent. Like, this is nothing. Like,
yeah,
you live with your mom, you take care of your mom, mashallah.
Mashallah, like, good for you.
Jazakallah khair. Like, yeah. But I'm like, oh, okay, I feel a little bit better about myself. So like Islam, not only like has it gotten me closer to God, but like in itself, like it saved my life. Like I joke that I'm terrified of my imam because he saved my life.